Hi, my name is Karen Cabello, and this is my rhetorical analysis on the chapter Sunsets from the Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. Before we begin, I'm going to give a brief introduction to the chapter. In the chapter Sunsets, John Green delves into the enthralling beauty of sunsets, and through his comparisons, he reveals his own inner conflicts with admiring the natural world, religion, and vulnerability. Now, let's take a look at PASS, which stands for Purpose, Audience, Speaker, and Situation. The purpose of this chapter is to ascertain that the beauty of things such as sunsets can be truly acknowledged only once you are vulnerable enough to admit that you love them. Now, John Green delves into many different topics within this chapter. However, the main purpose that I grasped is showing his audience that vulnerability is necessary to see the beauty in things, which he does so through the example of sunsets. The audience is mainly people that are afraid to expose facets of themselves to the world, or those who struggle to find the beauty in life around them. The speaker is obviously John Green, who has personally found it difficult to acknowledge the natural world as a thing of beauty due to his fear of being vulnerable. John Green shares his struggles and even outlines a change in how he perceives the idea of beauty in nature from the beginning to the end of the chapter. And the situation is John Green presents the topic of sunsets and is unsure how to go about describing their cliched beauty. Which brings us to the overview of the analysis. So here is a breakdown of the main devices used throughout the chapter to emphasize that purpose mentioned before. We have epigraph, anecdotes, hypophora, and metaphor. Let's start off with epigraph. An epigraph is a literary device in the form of a poem, quotation, or sentence which belongs to another writer. Epigraphs are usually included at the beginning of short works, but for the purpose of this analysis, they pertain to any quotations used by other authors anywhere throughout the essay. John Green uses epigraphs not only to provide context for his topic surrounding sunsets, but also uses them as proxies to describe his own thoughts and ideas that he cannot formulate into writing. Green uses epigraphs on several accounts, which shows that he feels inadequate using his own language to describe the beauty of sunsets. So he resorts to using other people's words that best match the ideas he's trying to convey. Here we can take a look at some examples. In this first one, Green cites from three different authors, each one meant to describe a certain idea pertaining to sunsets. For example, Roberto Bolaños, the sky at sunset looked like a carnivorous flower, meant to portray menace. For sentimentality, he cites Kerouac's On the Road. Soon it got dusk, a grappy dusk, a purple dusk over tangerine groves and long melon fields, the fields the color of love and Spanish mysteries. And Anna Akhmatova for mysticism. I cannot tell if the day is ending, or the world, or if the secret of secrets is inside me again. In this other example, Green even quotes God himself in the book of Exodus. You cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. Green quotes God to make a comparison between the sun and its godlike qualities, further emphasizing one of his many ideas about the beauty of sunsets. Green also employs anecdotes. An anecdote is a very short story that is significant to the topic at hand, usually adding personal knowledge or experience to the topic. John Green uses anecdotes mainly at the beginning of paragraphs to contextualize a new topic that he will be discussing. It also adds personal value and allows Green to create a connection with the audience. The two most significant examples of anecdotes in the chapter are the ones I have included here. A good sunset always steals the words from me, renders all my thoughts as gauzy and soft as the light itself. I'll admit, though, that when I see the sun sink below a distant horizon as the yellows and oranges and pinks flood the sky, I usually think, this looks photoshopped. Green introduces his experiences with sunsets and brings up the first topic of discussion within the chapter, which is the idea that the beauty of the natural world is not reality. In this other example, Green writes, my dog, Willie, died a few years ago, but one of my great memories of him is watching him play in the front yard of our house at dusk. He was a puppy then, and in the early evenings he would contract a case of the zoomies. He ran in delighted circles around us, yipping and jumping at nothing in particular. And then after a while, he'd get tired, and he'd run over to me and lie down. And then he would do something absolutely extraordinary. He would roll over onto his back and present his soft belly. Green's memory of Willie is used as an exposition to introduce the subject of vulnerability, which he delves into later in the paragraph, and I will go into further detail when we talk about metaphors. Next, we have hypophora. Hypophora is a figure of speech in which a writer raises a question and then immediately provides an answer to that question. John Green uses hypophora to create curiosity and raise interest among his audience. He also uses this device to introduce new topics within his writing. So let's take a look at some examples. On page 170, which is the very first page, Green states, "What are we to do about the cliched beauty of an ostentatious sunset?" Green uses a question in the very first sentence of the chapter to grab his audience's attention. He goes on to provide answers to this question right after, thus, it also functions as an introduction to his idea. In this other example, John Green asks, "Do I believe in God?" Green uses the question about his belief in God to shift from sunsets to a deeper, more personal topic regarding his religion, and to further emphasize the metaphor he makes with sunsets and God in the prior paragraph. And lastly, we have metaphor. A metaphor is a literary device comparing two unlike things through a perceived similarity. John Green uses metaphors to draw attention to those qualities he's comparing since they are often the main themes of his writing. His metaphors compare sunsets to other things in order to transcend his writing and make it more meaningful and introspective. Here are some examples. In all those senses, the sun is godlike. Green compares the sun to God. He's alluding to the fact that the sun is some higher power like an ethereal being. This metaphor is also meant to invite the topic of religion, which becomes a focal point for the paragraphs following it. Now, this other example was one of my personal favorites, examples of metaphor that he used throughout the chapter. He states, "He offered us the place ribs don't protect," talking about his dog that I mentioned before, trusting that we weren't going to bite or stab him. It's hard to trust the world like that, to show it your belly. And then again, on a separate paragraph, he brings this up again by saying, "But mostly, I think I'm just scared that if I show the world my belly, it will devour me." Green creates an extended metaphor using the puppy to relate to vulnerability. He brings up the dog's belly several times in more than one paragraph to resurface the theme and indulge the audience in some of his personal struggles and thoughts. Now we have the chapter rating. A main theme throughout the chapter is vulnerability, and John Green was vulnerable to his audience by sharing some of his deepest fears. I commend John Green for that, thus, I also give Sunsets 5 stars. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed my rhetorical analysis.